views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Hello and welcome to Open BXRx, BronxNet's special coverage providing you the latest information that matters to you during COVID-19, the coronavirus, and now through social justice actions and civil unrest taking place nationwide and here in the Bronx. I'm your host, Sonyi Lopez, and today is Tuesday, August 18th. Coming up, have you filled out your 2020 census? We'll learn how the Bronx is participating and what you can do to make our Bronx count. Then we'll discuss mental health stigmas and growing up with anxiety in our Black, Indigenous, and people of color communities with writer Bianca Silva. After that, ZAZA and Caribbean Archives celebrate, uplift, and spotlight the progress of Black Caribbean creatives and their narratives through movement and light. We'll learn more later on. And BX for Life, Black Lives Matter Forever is a film by Bronx filmmaker Dwayne Anthony. We'll learn how he highlights the Bronx during the COVID-19 pandemic and protest through film. So please stick around. Open BXRx starts now. Welcome to Open BXRx on BronxNet. I'm your host, Sonyi Lopez, inviting you to get social with us at BronxNet TV on Instagram and Twitter, and BronxNet Community Television on Facebook. Have you participated in the 2020 census? If not, don't worry, you still have until September to make our Bronx count. Responding to the census affects the amount of funding your community receives, how your community plans for the future, and your representation in government. And now more than ever, the Bronx needs you. Joining us now to share more information and updates on our participation so far is Mr. Jeff Behler. He is the Regional Director at the U.S. Census Bureau. Jeff, thank you so much for joining us again.
Absolutely. It's great to see you again.
Great to see you as well. So it's been a few months since we last spoke. We spoke back in April, I believe. First, can you please help us define what the census is for our viewers just tuning in?
Yeah, absolutely. This is the once a decade count that we do to highlight some of the things you mentioned. You know, ensure our communities have their fair share of representation and the hundreds of billions of dollars of federal funding for important programs like Medicare or Medicaid, or improving our roads and transportation systems, from education, national school lunch and breakfast programs, Pell Grants, Head Start, supplies for our children at school, and then to support healthcare, whether that's the number of beds or the number of hospitals in our community. This is the way to ensure your community gets its fair share for the next 10 years.
Thank you, Jeff. Now, how is the Bronx doing? How are we doing in terms of the count? What are the updates? Can you give us an update on the count here in the Bronx?
Yeah. So as of yesterday, about 3 o'clock, 56.4% of the households in the Bronx have self-responded to the 2020 census. That means they've gone online, they've called it in over the phone, or they filled it out on paper. If you want to compare, and it's not quite a fair comparison, but if you want to compare to how the Bronx did in 2010, at the end of the 2010 census, the Bronx was at 64% self-response rate. So we got a little room to grow, but we have time to get there.
Right. And what is that time, Jeff? What is the deadline for people to submit the census right now?
Yeah, so whether you self-respond, go online at 2020census.gov, call one of our 13 toll-free telephone numbers. For English, it's 844-330-2020. Or if you pull out that questionnaire that you have hanging on your fridge or sitting on your coffee table, fill it out, mail it back in. You have until the end of September 30th. That's also the day that will stop knocking on doors and trying to collect that information via conversation in person.
Got it. Thank you so much. So now I want to know about the hard to count areas. What percentage of the Bronx is a hard to count area, and how are people being outreached to during COVID-19?
Yeah, so it's hard to come up with a specific percentage for the Bronx. We know that every neighborhood has its unique characteristics, and whether that's large families, whether that's multiple families living in a single family home, whether that's a high percentage of renters, children under the age of 5, of course, minority communities. These are all characteristics of communities that are harder to count. And what we've done, our partners have been amazing, from the borough president to council member Jonai, to organizations like ICNA Relief or Van Nest Neighborhood Alliance. They have been amazing partners, in getting the word out to their communities on what's at stake for the 2020 census, but doing it in a way where it's coming from a trusted voice and the message resonates with the community members. And we are so dependent on our partners who in the Bronx have been amazing. And we'll continue to work with them, continuing working to get the message out. And now they're starting to invite us, now that some of the restrictions have been lifted, we're going to parks or food distribution sites. And our staff are showing up there with iPads, and walking the lines or walking a community park to see if there's anyone who hasn't filled it out, to give them the opportunity to fill it out right then and there, using our resources, using our internet and Wi-Fi, using our device. So we'll continue to do that all the way through the end of September to ensure every person, every household in the Bronx gets its opportunity to complete their 2020 census.
Right. And Jeff, you kind of hinted at this earlier, but as we know, Bronx sites have been hit hard by COVID-19. Are hospitals also affected by the census count? And how can being counted influence the funding that our health services receive?
Yeah, great question. And absolutely, hospitals are impacted by an inaccurate census count, because when we talk about the funding that comes into communities for healthcare, it's for hospitals or hospital beds. It's for emergency personnel. It's for supplies for those emergency personnel. It's for transportation to and from clinics for those that may need that transportation. And I can't think of an easier way to support your healthcare professionals and your healthcare community by taking 5 minutes to fill out your 2020 census. Ensure your community gets its fair share of funding. Ensure your healthcare professionals get what they need to ensure they can serve the community.
Right. And how about our children? Schools have been closed. Education received huge budget cuts in the beginning of the COVID-19 crisis. Please tell us about the importance of counting babies and children during the census as well.
Yeah, when you think about, we do this once every 10 years. So a baby who's 2 today will be 12 the next time we conduct a census. And think of all the different programs that child will touch, from national school lunch or breakfast programs. They may need Head Start or aftercare. Supplies in that school. When we look at the size of our classrooms, census data is used to determine, do we need new schools? So let's make sure we get a complete and accurate count, so the people who are making those decisions, whether it has to do with healthcare or it has to do with education and opening up additional schools or adding teachers and classrooms to the schools that are there, let's make sure those decision makers have the best possible data to make well-educated, informed decisions. How we do that? Take the 5 minutes, invest in the next 10 years by filling out your census today.
And it's only 10 quick questions. Another thing, Jeff, a lot of people have concerns about their personal information. How is the census ensuring that personal information is not shared?
Yeah, absolutely. Title 13, a federal law that was put in place in 1954, protects every piece of data we collect. Under this law, we cannot release information to anyone at any time that's at the person or household level. So when we release our data, it's at a state level, a city level, a census tract level. It does not include names or addresses, because by law, we cannot release that information. So local, state, and federal law enforcement can never access our data at any time for any reason, which includes housing authorities, local police. It includes IRS or Homeland Security or Customs and Immigration. No one can access that data at any time for any reason, period. In addition, for all those census takers that are out there knocking on doors, it's okay to open up your door to them, because the data they collect is also protected under Title 13. And all census employees take an oath of confidentiality for life, meaning if we were to release information about a person or a household, we'll be in prison up to 5 years and fined up to $250,000. We take this seriously because we know the public's trust is the foundation of getting a complete and accurate census.
Another thing I read, Jeff, is that there's no citizenship question this time around. Is this the first time in the census that question is not being added to the list?
Yeah, I think the last time it was asked was, I believe, 1970, and it hasn't been asked since. And of course, there was a fight, to whether or not to include this. Supreme Court ruled it could not be included on the census. So absolutely, people need to understand, we do not ask for citizenship status on the census, whether we're knocking on your door, whether you fill it out online. In addition, we never ask for bank account or credit card information. We never ask for money. We never ask for anything on behalf of a political party, and we never ask for social security numbers. If you hear that information, more than likely it's a scam. You can reach out to us, 844-330-2020. We can do employee verifications. We can let you know whether or not a scam is going on in your community, or at least validate whether or not it's a legitimate survey that may be done by someone else.
Thank you for that. Another important purpose of the census is, of course, representation in our neighborhoods. What is the census's role in the upcoming 2020 elections?
Yeah, so when you think about that other key reason why the census is so important, it is representation. From the number of seats that New York State will have in the U.S. House of Representatives and the next congressional delegation will be based upon the 2020 census. The Electoral College will be based upon the 2020 census. And then when you look at the state level, from drawing voting precincts and school districts, it's important that in order for your community to get the representation it deserves, and to ensure that representation matches the diversity of the community or understands the needs of that community, we have to make sure that your community, every community, and throughout every neighborhood throughout the Bronx gets a complete and accurate count. And again, for those of you who filled it out, thank you so much. We greatly appreciate it, but your job's not done. We need you to talk to your neighbors, those you worship with, those you work with. Ask them if they filled it out. If they haven't, tell them how easy it was. Let them know that it's safe based upon, what we spoke about here today, and let them know what's at stake for the next 10 years.
Right. Before we go, Jeff, of course, can you give us all the different ways that a person that's viewing right now can complete their census right now today?
Yeah, absolutely. 2020census.gov. Click on the respond button, formatted for a smartphone, for a tablet, a laptop. You can do it right now as you're watching this video. You can pull out your smartphone and take 5 minutes to do that. You can call one of our 13 toll-free telephone numbers, one for each language that we support. For English, it's 844-330-2020. Again, if you have that paper questionnaire laying around, now's the time to fill it out, put it in that postage-paid envelope, mail it back in. Because the fourth way, which we've started on August 3rd, census takers will be knocking on the doors of every household that has yet to respond to the census. So if you don't want someone knocking on your door, go online, call it in over the phone, fill out that paper form, and get it back in.
You heard it here, folks. Thank you so much, Mr. Jeff Behler, the Regional Director from the U.S. 2020 Census, for joining us again today.
Thank you.
Folks, again, the website is 2020census.gov. Please make our Bronx count. We only have but so much time.
It looks bleak. It feels bleak. But the city isn't shut down because our public services keep working. In spite of, and in the face of, the dangers, we can count on them. And to keep them working and funded now and in the future, we need to be counted. Self-respond now to the 2020 census at my2020census.gov.
Welcome back. Due to anxiety-triggering stressors of COVID-19, including self-quarantining, social isolation, the mass media, civil unrest, and more, many people of color are starting to realize just how much they've neglected their mental health. Joining us now to discuss existing mental health stigmas in our communities and her piece in HuffPost titled "What It's Like to Live with Anxiety and Depression in a Latinx Household" is writer and photographer Bianca Silva. Bianca, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. So first and foremost, how are you? And please tell us a little bit about yourself.
So I'm doing pretty good right now. I literally finished like a shift. I've been working sort of as a fact checker for Schnepp's Media based in Bayside here in Queens. So I've been kind of like scrambling around all day, but all good. And like you mentioned, I am a writer and photographer, and I've written about arts, culture, music, sports. So that's sort of, what my main focus is.
Got you. I'm glad to hear that you're doing well and you're working remotely. So there's a lot, changing in our media world nowadays. But like you said, you're a writer. And now we can talk about the piece that you wrote for HuffPost. My colleague Franchesca actually read it first and sent it over to me. And we were immediately like, wow, we can relate as, being raised in a Dominican household, it immediately kind of resonated with us. Can you tell us about your piece, what it's really like to live with anxiety and depression in a Latinx household? And, was it challenging for you to write this personal piece?
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. So, writing this piece, it was sort of a, going on an emotional journey. So it was a piece where, I'd been wanting to write about it for a while now. So I would say like a couple years or so, but I just didn't have the willpower to do it, or I would just hesitate.
Mm-hmm.
But what inspired me to finally write it was I saw a Twitter post from like the person who edited the piece, Sahaj from the HuffPost. She was looking for BIPOC writers. Am I saying that correctly? BIPOC?
I think so.
Yeah. So she was, looking for BIPOC writers to contribute to stories, regarding mental health, and for Minority Mental Health Awareness Month, which I didn't even know was a thing until I saw her post. Now that I, moved out from home and kind of had some distance, I kind of felt like finally empowered to write this piece. And, it, like I said, it was an emotional journey. It brought up a lot of it made me relive some of those really tense moments, some of those very difficult moments that I had gone through.
Right. And one of those things where Bianca, you shared that you had a hard time finding or accessing care, or admitting that you had care, admitting that you had a psychologist at home. You would lie to your mom and say, I'm going out with friends, when in fact you were going to visit your therapist.
Yeah.
What are some of the things that you can discuss when it comes to finding care in the BIPOC community? See, I'm saying it wrong too. And just, accessing healthcare and mental health care during these times of need, especially.
So, I think, I was in a situation where fortunately my health insurance covered those mental health services, but I realized that's not the case for many of us in our community, where, it's difficult to even begin to find those resources. There's that level. And then there's also the level of, I gotta live sort of like a double life almost, and that's how, for the longest time, that's how I felt like I was living. When back in college, I would always say, oh, I'm working at school, when in reality I was in the neighborhood, talking to somebody once a week.
Something else you bring up is that, you've had your successes in life when it comes to employment and just education, and your family has a certain expectation of, you shouldn't be feeling this way because you're successful, and you should be fine because you're doing things that other people aren't doing. But can you help us break that stigma where, success doesn't equate happiness or being mentally okay?
Yeah, I just, I feel like the stigma that we have in these communities is that, you're not allowed to be vulnerable. You have to be persistent, to the point of stubbornness, which is sort of how we end up in that position to begin with. Success doesn't always equate to, total happiness, total, mindfulness. It's something, that many of us, like many successful people in general, struggle with. Recently, Michelle Obama herself, came out and said that she was, she had low-grade depression because of the circumstances. And, hearing such a powerful woman like Michelle Obama say that, that's something I feel, people in, Black and Latinx communities can relate to.
Yeah.
This is a very successful woman who was the first lady, and, also has done a lot of stuff in her own right, sharing her experience with depression.
Right. And can you tell us about the importance of Black and Latinx people recognizing their needs and getting past the fear of judgment especially when seeking professional help? Why do you think that we have this fear when finding help in the first place?
I feel like many of us in our communities, we fear that help because, you know, we are told from a young age, like, you have to be strong.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you can't be weak. And seeking that help is sort of like admitting that there's something wrong with you. It's sort of like admitting, like, there is this sort of like dirty laundry that I need to air, but we can't air it because then everybody starts like gossiping, you know, bonchinchado, you know, stuff like that. So I think that's sort of the fear. And because we're reluctant to pursue that help to the point of stubbornness, like it comes at a price. It comes at like suffering. You know, what happens is that we suffer in silence.
And a lot of times I feel like we don't discuss the backgrounds in mental health in our families. So like if we have a family member who has schizophrenia, for instance, or depression or anxiety, we don't often know about these conditions. And a lot of times, you know, doctors ask, what are the conditions in your family? What's your family history? And unfortunately, we don't speak about the mental health aspect of it. We don't know, you know, what we're faced with later on. How do you believe, aside from discussing these things with our family members, how do you believe that we can begin to undo the stigmas in our Black and Brown communities, starting with ourselves?
Yeah. So, you know, like in the piece, I specifically mentioned that, you know, a way to undo the stigma is by acknowledging it ourselves, because if we don't acknowledge that, you know, we need to seek treatment of some form, how can we tell other people that it's okay to talk to a therapist, that it's okay to seek help, what, you know, like whatever it is? If we don't start with ourselves, how can we, you know, persuade others to get that same help? You know, we have to like work and like continuously work, because it doesn't change overnight. You know, no one's going to go overnight, wake up the next morning and say, hey, like, it's okay. You know, it takes work. It takes years to even begin to undo that stigma.
Absolutely. I definitely agree with that. Thank you, Bianca. So I know that you said that you live alone, but through COVID-19, a lot of people have been stuck at home with families who may not entirely understand our anxieties. And some of those family members may even be the culprit of the anxiety. Can we also discuss the challenges of that, of just living at home with a Latinx family or, you know, Black Latino family who may not understand what you're dealing with?
Yeah, sure. So I actually live with my boyfriend.
Okay.
So like no, it's okay. No, it's okay. Yeah, no, we moved in together about a couple years ago, but, you know, I can only imagine, you know, living, like, being stuck at home with, you know, sheltering in place with family who do not understand. And I feel some of the challenges may be, you know, I feel like everybody is experiencing like similar feelings at the moment of, you know, like some sort of depression, some sort of stress about not being able to work, not being able to do this and that. And I feel like a challenge would be like, I guess, like someone in the family being more reluctant to like even more reluctant than usual to validate, you know, someone's feelings.
Yeah. We don't talk enough about how much social isolation and distancing and quarantining yourselves can kind of make you, I don't know, look inside yourself and realize that maybe you've been declining or ignoring the fact that you may have some type of anxiety, you know, or something like that you've never experienced at that height before.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that as well. I'm sure that many folks have read and appreciated your piece as much as we have. What types of things are you hearing back as feedback from the piece since you wrote it, and how are people reacting to it?
Yeah, so I've been pretty amazed and overwhelmed at the amount of like the positivity that the piece has gotten. So I've gotten, you know, responses from people I went to, you know, middle school with and high school with in Washington Heights and in East Harlem about, you know, how important the story is to them and how they're able to relate. And I've also gotten like feedback from some of my colleagues in journalism and, you know, also, you know, like some friends that I have that are in psychology saying like, you know, I didn't know, you know, people in BIPOC communities, like, I didn't know this is the extent of what somebody in those communities can go through. And, you know, for many, it's been sort of like a learning experience, like, oh, this is something new. And for people who have gone through it, you know, it's sort of amazing how like people have told me, hey, like I've gone through something similar. When the piece was about to be published, like I was scared that my piece would be seen as, oh, me being like over dramatic, or, you know, what I have gone through is not valid because I haven't done like, I guess like because I didn't go through the extreme. So overall, I'm just sort of grateful for all the positive feedback that I've had, and, you know, hopefully I've made someone's day like better, you know.
You have, and maybe you've helped somebody else be courageous enough to share their personal story as well. So thank
Yeah.
you for that. To wrap up, can you please leave us with a message for the community on mental health and where people can connect with you, follow you, and also read the piece on HuffPost?
You know, you're not alone. Like, we're not alone in the struggle. That, you know, like, even if when you feel like you're down, like there's like no hope in life, like you're not the only one. And there's always ways to finding that help, whether it's like calling a hotline, or, you know, at least in New York City, there's like a resource for mental health services for COVID, things like that. You know, like there are options to finding that. And, you know, you can follow me on Twitter at the Bianca Silva. And, you know, I'm trying to build up the Twitter a little more, but, you know, like I'm always willing to like lend an ear, talk, things like that. So
Thank you so much, Bianca.
thank
And you
you.
can find her piece, folks, on HuffPost.com. You might have to Google it. The title is What It's Like to Live with Anxiety and Depression in a Latinx Household. So you can find that on Google through HuffPost Personal. Thank you so much, Bianca, for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. We'll be right back. Welcome back. ZAZA Uptown aims to give a platform to Black Caribbean women through photo, video, film, writing, and more through curation, direction, publishing, and visual documentation. Joining us now to discuss are co-curators of ZAZA, Zainab, Floyd, and Angelica Calderon. Hi, ladies. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Of course. So the first thing I wanted to start with, of course, is for people who are not familiar with ZAZA Uptown. Can you give us a little background on ZAZA and your mission?
Yeah, so ZAZA Uptown was founded by me and Zainab as of last year. Our purpose of ZAZA Uptown is to dedicate the progression of Black women, femmes, and non-binary folks, creatives, through curation and archiving the history, both past and present.
Thank you for that, Angelica. And Zainab, you are also the founder of the Caribbean Archive. Can you tell us about your work with that as well?
Yes, so Caribbean Archive, I began Caribbean Archive last year. Its sole purpose was to hold a space for education, to highlight narratives of Black Caribbean femmes and women who are creating a scholarship of work. So we're anthropologists, dancers, writers, poets, and world makers.
As we know, there are plenty of Caribbean Black filmmakers and creators around the city, everywhere, but we don't have a lot of spaces where we can see that work. So thank you for creating that, both of you, really. I wanted to talk about just the importance of celebrating, uplifting, and empowering women and femmes that create this work through your pages, through your platforms.
I think that there is definitely a space to be had for Black Caribbean femmes and gender nonconforming individuals to have a collective space where people can just look at individuals who are creating work outside and on the island. Yeah.
And also, you know, just the deep-rooted historical erasure of Black Caribbean identity. And then tying that to womanhood and just like the selfhood of women and gender expansive folks is still ongoing today. So we wanted to root back to our identity because we've had trouble finding that within an academic space. And that's the sole reason why we wanted to expand that space on a digital platform, because it provides accessibility, but also a connection for those that want to find that place for them, and also for us to find people that feel the same way.
Thank you for that. And I wanted to bring up, speaking of identity, Angelica, you're of Dominican descent, and Zainab, you're of Haitian descent, and you kind of came together to curate ZAZA. Can we talk about just the fact that, you know, racism and colorism in modern day Hispaniola, you know, I feel like we're neighbors on the island, but not a lot of people feel the same way. So can we just discuss like the challenges that we also face there with colorism and racism on the country?
I think that the conversations that are based on colorism, texturism, featureism, and racism in general are not necessarily conversations that are had. There's definitely a lot of hesitation because of trauma and the triggers that it brings, and the fact that I've met Angelica. We met through the Studio Museum in Harlem when we were teenagers, and we automatically connected, and it was a kind of sister bond that we could not bring words to. And I think that it just shows even more the importance of ZAZA Uptown.
I feel like, especially like being in the pandemic, there comes a point where we don't want to re-traumatize ourselves. We don't want to have a debate with someone who, like, we don't want to have a debate on why we shouldn't be oppressed. Like, we know that this has been an ongoing battle within the Latinx, the Caribbean community. There comes a point where, you know, like the whole point of like ZAZA, like we're trying to give, like ZAZA is like literally a mirror of like the people that you choose, that you think are like not visibly Caribbean or not visibly Latinx. It's like, we want to pick and choose our battles when it comes to that. Like, we know it exists. It's just when it comes repetitive, it's like, you know, you decide when you're ready to admit that Black people exist. Like, Blackness is global. So we know our audience, and we know that we want to express joy and root back and liberate our Blackness on our platform.
Yes.
Another day.
I think you're both doing that beautifully. And I want to just highlight a clip that you shared by Numa Perrier, Florida Water. I would not have known about this filmmaker. She's a Haitian filmmaker if it weren't for ZAZA. So thank you for sharing that. It was a clip that displayed the resilience and almost the serenity, if you will, in Haiti following the 2010 earthquake. So, you know, I appreciated seeing that. And I thank you both for sharing the work of a femme filmmaker from Haiti in that way. And I hope that this can also aid in the conversations that we lack in our communities. You know, going to this platform and seeing these pieces being shared may help aid in that conversation, I hope. I wanted to also ask what the themes are that are represented in some of the works you share. What can someone expect from seeing the post on ZAZA and as well as the Caribbean Archive feed?
I think that one of the things that we also try to make extremely important is to make individuals feel affirmed. Like, wow, I see myself in this, and I did not know this was happening within the Caribbean and outside of the Caribbean, particularly the Bronx and Mount Vernon and other areas of New York in general. And I feel that it makes people feel good. It makes you feel affirmed. And even the language that we use to describe what artists are doing, it's digestible and it's easy to access. And I think that that's a recurring theme that I try to do with Caribbean Archive, and we try to do with ZAZA Uptown.
Yeah, there's definitely a collective joy that Zainab and I, like just the two of us, like creating ZAZA. Like, the reason why ZAZA was created was joy, and continuing that joy, because ancestral trauma exists, but also ancestral joy. And we really wanted ZAZA to be that place digitally. So, and like discovering the Black Caribbean artists that we have, and also like bringing our friends to our platform to dedicate the progression of them. There's definitely collective like navigation and exploration of our selfhood. So that just like, which continues like dismantling these systems because we're creating and producing. So there's definitely a sense of community through that platform.
And if you can also speak to us about the lack of representation of Afro-Caribbean women in media, particularly in Latinx novelas and film, movies and stuff like that, in front of and behind the camera. Although the women exist that are doing this work, the representation is seldom there, if you can speak on that.
Like going back to community, like some examples I could think of is, you know, the whole Emmy situation, like some, you know, non-Black Latinx actors saying like, why aren't there like Latinx representation? But Jerome is literally, he's standing right there. Like, you know, it's like there's that pick and choose of which Latinx person, which Caribbean person do you actually want to win? You know, like who, you know, there's a lot of, I think it's very much like behind the scenes, because although like Jerome is there, MJ Rodriguez is there, it's like there's still like an ignore from, you know, like the ones who are behind, the ones who are like hidden because they have the power. So I think there's, and you know, like just thinking about like novelas in general, like most of like the novelas I used to watch when I was younger, like, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, because I haven't watched any in a while, but I've never seen a novela that was like set in like Puerto Rico, like, or like Haiti. Like it's usually like, you know, it's not in the Caribbean islands, and makes sense of like the high demographic, like the percentage is Black Caribbean people that take up those spaces, so that own that, you know, live in those spaces. So it's just definitely like an ongoing conversation of, you know, like our identity, like questioning and reflecting like Latinidad, and you know, even like Latinidad is still like a question that's within like Caribbean identity, like just questioning ourselves and like reflecting like the negative isms that are put on to why it's so hard to see a Black person being a protagonist in a Spanish speaking show. So.
And I agree wholeheartedly with what Angelica said.
Thank you. One last thing before we go. I wish we had more time to just like discuss everything and like delve into the topics that you're so lovingly sharing with us. And you know, these discussions need to continuously happen. And like you said, Angelica, there hasn't been novelas in different places like that. I've just seen like Mexico. When we were growing up, we had Carita de Ángel and one like Black actor as a child. So we didn't have a lot of representation back in the day, or now either. So I hope that changes now with all the narratives that are going around with people talking about inclusivity. And like, before we go, do you think that's even like genuine, or has it happened? Like, is it a moment for people, or is it a movement for representation and diversity and inclusion to happen in these places?
I mean, going back to the behind the scenes stuff, like there's you know, like there's quite a few shows that have like a Black protagonist, but it's like the way that they're written is like not genuine. It's very much stuck in the past. And you know, like although there is a Black protagonist, which is like beautiful, but it's like there's a continuation of re-traumatizing the protagonist also. So it's like there needs to come a point where it's not written that you're traumatizing a protagonist in order to like gain profit. Like that protagonist deserves joy, because that deserves to be seen. And you know, there's you know, we don't, especially like as a viewer, like I don't need to be taught that. I don't need to be retaught trauma all the time if we're experiencing it, you know, because then you question like who's your audience in the first place. So it's definitely possible, but you know, like it's definitely a question of like power. And when it comes to power, you have to dismantle racism, colorism, you know, texturism and featureism, as Zainab said prior.
And what are your hopes with ZAZA and the Caribbean Archive? What's coming up for you both, and how can people stay in touch and follow the pages as well? And let's say there's a creative that wants to submit their work, how can they do that?
We are really excited for the projects that we have in mind. We are working on a zine, but also the pandemic has also put a pause on a lot of the work that we want to produce. But we mostly reach out to the individuals on our following, but we are also open to submissions. Yeah, we have a lot of stuff in store for ZAZA.
Yeah, if you want to reach out, you could email to us at zazaartcollective@gmail.com. You could follow Zainab and her offspring, the Caribbean Archive. It's at Caribbean Archive on Instagram. And you could follow Zainab and me and Zainab's project, Zaza Uptown, at Zaza_Uptown on IG. And we're also on Facebook. And we have a Spotify if you want to listen to some tunes, because we got that too. But yeah, that's where we're at. Do you also want us to tell us our personal IG accounts, or?
Yeah, if you want, we can add that in as well.
Okay. So you could follow me at wayward_Cal, CAL.
I guess you can follow me at That Girl Luna. Yeah, we work on a lot of individual projects as well. Me and Angelica are practicing artists based in Mount Vernon and the Bronx. And we focus our work on the narratives of Black, Caribbean, femmes, GNC individuals.
Right. Thank you both again so much for making the time to join us and talk to us about ZAZA Uptown and the Caribbean Archive. I really, really love the pages. And I feel like this 10-minute interview wasn't enough to brush on and show and display all the beauty and joy that you've shown on these pages. So thank you. And I hope to invite our viewers to check them out.
Thank you so much.
Of course.
Thank you so much.
Again, folks, to see work by Black Caribbean women and femme, please follow at Zaza_Uptown and at Caribbean Archive on Instagram. We'll be right back.
We know that people are dealing with the health crisis, but there's also a lot of food insecurity.
We're giving out healthy food options, and that's what's key here.
If you're a senior, you have a disability, they'll actually deliver meals to you.
The residents are anxious, they're worried, they're scared, they want to be tested.
When things were happening in our community, and we couldn't get the help.
There's almost a presumption of criminality that attaches to your skin color.
The site will prioritize those who are at highest risk in the population.
If you feel symptoms and you'd like to visit one of these COVID-19 testing sites here in the Bronx, you may call the State Health Department's hotline.
Important to note about this site is no reservations are needed. This is a walk-in clinic.
A lot of us are out of work and looking for something to do.
We have the machinery and the skills to make large scales of these masks and gowns.
Take care of your people. It's going to go way further than we actually can understand.
Right now, employees like myself are just adjusting to the new reality.
Reporting from Bronx. Welcome back. BX for Life, Black Lives Matter Forever is a film highlighting the Bronx during COVID-19, an homage to all Bronxites from essential workers to protesters and change makers in our borough. The film was shot, edited, and narrated by a local filmmaker who seeks to be more involved in his surroundings. Joining us now to discuss is Bronx filmmaker Dwayne Anthony. Dwayne, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. I definitely appreciate it. It's a pleasure and it's an honor.
Of course. Likewise. I really, really enjoyed your film and I want our viewers to learn more about it. But first, before we delve into the film, just tell us a little bit about yourself and your upbringing here in the Bronx. Where did you grow up? All that good stuff. And how long have you been a filmmaker?
Yeah, definitely. So Bronx has been home for me pretty much all my life, despite living in Jamaica a little bit. But I'm born and raised in the Bronx. I grew up in North Bronx and South Bronx. So I was born at North Central Hospital around Jerome Avenue. I don't know if you know around there, by Tracy Towers. So yeah, I learned how to ride a bike around there. And then with my family, I lived with my grandmother and cousins around 161st Yankee Stadium. So I've been around the South Bronx, and then uptown, I went to school at PS 21, 225th, White Plains Road. I went to church on 220th on Bronxwood, where I met my best friend and now my wife, which is one of my, greatest blessings. So I think, the Bronx I've been around the block. I spent like my adolescent years in South Bronx. I went to school on 174th Southern Boulevard, and I lived also behind Edenwald Project. So that's about me. In terms of growing up in the neighborhood, I've been writing stories and comedy skits for about 5 years now, and just conceptualizing them through videography for about 3 years. So my wife and I, we started DXA Studios back in 2013. And so we used to take wedding photos and videos for our friends and family. And now it kind of turned into like our media baby. So we launched our YouTube channel, The Morgans, back in 2017, which was like a year after we got married. And it was really to just promote young people, elderly people, but just really to promote young people, people of color, and people who are married, just on a journey to let them know that, you know, you can do this while you're young, and it's just a journey. It's going to be up and down, and it can be done though. So yeah.
Shout out to the wife. Shout out to the Morgans. That's you. And I'm your neighbor. I grew up in the South Bronx as well, so I know exactly what you're talking about when you talk about Jerome, Southern Boulevard, all that good stuff.
Yeah.
So now about your film, BX for Life, Black Lives Matter Forever. Please tell us more about it. Also, what is your role as a filmmaker during these tough times in our borough?
So I think during these times, it is more important to show what is positively being done to incite change in our community, rather than like focusing on the bad or the damage that has been done. As a Black creative, I think for me, it's important that people are seeing it through our lens and through our perspective. You know, sometimes the news outlets, they're not going to show a narrative that will be reflecting on how we feel it and how we see it and what we go through. So I think it's important to show it in the daily battles that we fight, you know, especially in our community where we're fighting a pandemic where it's much higher risk for us in our communities, and as well as the racial war that we're facing right now. It's like we're fighting two battles. And so I feel like anyone who's a creator during these times, they want to reflect the words of Nina Simone, which is, I wanted to do that with a short film, you know. Yeah, so I think it's important to definitely share that.
Right. Thank you for sharing that. And I definitely agree that, you know, they have to hear our voices, and our voices have to be represented, because the mainstream media is not doing it justice, and yeah, they're on the front lines like we are. So, you know, I commend you for the film. And for those who haven't seen it, can you just give us a little bit of background on the film?
So as far as the film, I think it was important for me to reflect how I did it, because as you can see in the film, it was showing like perspectives of me being a child again, showing, you know, being in the car with my parents and just showing how they go by their day to day. And I really wanted to depict that because, for example, Van Cortlandt Park, my mom going there to help with mental health, help with just overcoming anxiety, depression by exercising. I remember being a child, she actually used to bring me to that park. I used to go to that park to go to track practice. I used to run track. So it was good to see that, and it was warming. It was like a warming feeling to see her going there, you know. And then my dad, he doesn't work too far from there. And just to see him being able to still, despite as an essential worker, have to push through every day. He had to take multiple tests when the test became available. He was taking the test 2 or 3 times a week just to ensure, because he worked at a nursing home, that he was okay and he was good for his family. So I wanted to show those two avenues, because that's what many of our people in our community are going through right now. A lot of people, mental health is very serious and important. And I wanted to show that, you know, we still need to take care of ourselves as well as, you know, take care of our family. And so I wanted to show that childhood family dynamic. Yeah.
We saw that, and I saw a lot of things that I can also relate to as a Bronxite and as a person of color growing up in the Bronx. Just seeing your parents go to work and following them through all the motions of that. Well, your father, who's an essential worker, and then you said your mom was laid off or something. She wasn't working for a while.
She wasn't working for about 4 months. Yeah, because she worked in childcare. So, you know, with her boss being home, you know, and with the COVID-19 going on, it was better for her to just be home than for her boss to be home with the kids. So, yeah.
And then, you know, struggling with mental health and taking you along on that journey where she's working out at Van Cortlandt, using one of our most beautiful parks in the Bronx in order to kind of like explore that mental well-being. So I really appreciated seeing both aspects and seeing both sides, how difficult it is to see your father go to a nursing home to work, and then also seeing your mom go through the motions of like battling with anxiety and depression.
Yeah. Listen.
It was really, really a beautiful glimpse into like your reality, and it was very vulnerable. And I appreciate that. I wanted to also ask you, you know, then we lead into the community protesting and rallying for Black Lives Matter through the Bronx. Tell us why highlighting these events through this pandemic is important at this time, and how the movement has moved you as a filmmaker.
So for me, as a young Black man growing up in the Bronx, I've never faced the racial hostility that I faced when my wife and I, you know, moved to Florida. It's crazy enough, like, even though you grew up in the Bronx, there's certain things that I just never really, is either I was either sheltered from, I just didn't realize it, because in the Bronx, there's just certain things, the dynamic is different.
Right.
You know, there's certain racial, you know, slurs or racial, you know, feelings that you just don't necessarily feel until you get out of your comfort zone, or you go to a different environment where it's still heavy. It's still very heavy. And so while living there, I actually became involved with like the Black Lives Matter movement in Florida after the death of, it was Eric Garner. And now the death of George Floyd, which, you know, incited so much activism throughout the world. It was important for me to display the rallies and protests that took place here in the Bronx, you know, because of our community, and just seeing being united, I think was important for me to display that. I really felt moved to do that. Being with family members, I was with friends, and just being impacted and how we were impacted. I wanted to display how we're trying to overcome and how we're trying to press towards a better mark.
Right. Thank you for sharing that. And you use a quote to open the film, which was being a product of your environment. And just tell us a little bit about that quote and how your upbringing in the Bronx has influenced you.
So for me, my wife and I, we talk about this all the time. You hear the saying, don't be a product of your environment, right? And oftentimes when your environment is not a positive one, but what about when your environment is exactly what propels you to be the best version of yourself? You know, considered, you know, things may not always be great in your environment, but we're products of the Bronx. We grew up here, we went to school here. The Bronx has inspired us to be better and to work smarter. So that I'm grateful. I'm grateful for the ups and downs. I'm grateful for all of it, because despite the misconceptions of how people may see the Bronx and sometimes the harsh realities of the Bronx, you know, it's what you do that will determine a better outcome for your environment. So
that is a fact, like we say here in the Bronx.
That's facts. Nah, that's straight facts.
That's facts. So what do you hope that people can take away from the film?
I think for me, it is to really grasp the culture of the people of the Bronx, the resilient spirit, the determination and the unity that we can have. I want to inspire people to really get involved.
And you are absolutely doing that. So thank you for the film that you've created. And I know the viewers are like, all right, y'all talking about the film so much. Let's watch the damn film already. So we're premiering it right here at BronxNet. Thank you for allowing us to premiere it here. Where can people follow your work and see the film again in case they want to watch it again?
Yeah, definitely. So you can follow me at Dwayne Anthony. So it's _ Dwayne Anthony. That's _ DWAYNEANTHONY. Also Dwayne Anthony on Facebook. And the film is going to be on YouTube as well under The Morgans. So that is The Morgans, just THEMORGANS. You'll be able to see the film there. It's also going to be linked under my Instagram as well. There's going to be a link with the YouTube video as well. So you can just click on that link. And don't forget to subscribe. You can check it out. Let me know what you guys think. And that's where you can find the film.
Thank you so much for your time today, Dwayne.
No, thank you. I appreciate it. This was a blessing.
Of course. It was a blessing having you as well. Folks, without further ado, we now present you with BX for Life, Black Lives Matter Forever by Bronx filmmaker Dwayne Anthony.
There's a saying, don't be a product of your environment. But yo, the truth is, I'm the epitome of that. My family, my wife, my friends, my boys, my brothers, my sisters, they're all products of their environment. Obviously, that can be good or bad. I feel like the saying should be, don't be influenced by the wrong product of your environment. Like, that makes a difference. I'm the product of blackness. 2 hard-working parents who were immigrants came from Jamaica. My pops, who is an essential worker, has to be tested for the coronavirus twice a week. Mom's haven't worked in months. Paranoid. I told her, Mom, you gotta get out. You gotta go for a walk. Stop watching the news so much. Get some fresh air.
Have you been in the last 14 days?
No.
Feeling sick, fever, cold, flu?
No.
Been in contact with somebody who's tested positive for COVID-19?
No.
Thankfully, I was blessed to be raised with the right things instilled in me. But honestly, not everybody has that, you know. So many people in our community come from broken homes. Mom's is not there, or Pops is not there. So many different avenues. But I feel like the difference in how people can become better is the influence. My people are one of the hardest working people on the planet. So many people I know got 9-to-5s, and they leave their 9-to-5, their corporate job, and they're back on their grind with their 5 to 9, their side hustle, their businesses, working, grinding. Thank you. I think the biggest thing for me, and still being a part of the Bronx community, is how can I be more involved? I need to step up. I'm speaking on behalf of myself and other black men in the community around my age. Yo, we gotta step up. We have to move as a unit and not on no gang. Nah. We gotta protect our community. We gotta protect our children. We gotta protect our women, our black women, from this society that's fighting against us.
And we just wanted to stop the violence in our community. We wanted to give the youth another platform. So when that happened, we had young brothers who were incarcerated that came back out that wanted to help us during this fight.
You know, finding more men to be counselors and can give that guidance and counseling.
I want you to understand, my brothers and sisters, that we are not that far removed from being enslaved. Understand that. So when they say get over it, I say you get under it.
People are worried and stressed over the new norm, and honestly, the Bronx, we know how to make do with what we have through music, food. That's 2 things our community definitely loves, through the arts and through science. I'm already seeing parking lot parties, people chilling, so that ain't the real issue at hand. We have to figure out a way how to really, truly be unified. That's the only way we're gonna see some type of change. Because yo, the police brutality and all that, yo, that's still gonna happen. Whether we like it or not, that's the hard truth. Sometimes people bad mind, and this is not the time for people to be bad mind. I'm grateful for where I grew up. It made me who I am today. It taught me some valuable lessons in life, along with my family. Not to take no for an answer. Always watch your back. More importantly, be your brother's keeper.
Good afternoon, everybody. Happy Juneteenth. Yeah. I said happy Juneteenth. Yeah. So I came here to add a little Latino flavor. Yeah. Because I'm sick and tired of Latinos fronting like we're not black.
Yeah. Blah, blah, blah.